My father handed my brother the keys to his BMW on a Sunday afternoon in September. I was standing in the driveway watching, the late summer sun catching the red in my hair, holding a manila envelope he'd given me 20 minutes earlier. Inside was a power of attorney document, 8 pages of legal language that essentially made me responsible for his finances if he ever became incapacitated. My brother Kyle got a $50,000 car. I got paperwork. Dad clapped Kyle on the shoulder, told him he'd earned it, that he was proud of the man he'd become. Then he turned to me and said, "You'll know what to do with that when the time comes. You're the Let me take you back, because this story isn't about a car or a legal document. It's about learning that sometimes the thing that feels like rejection is actually the greatest inheritance you'll ever receive. If you've ever been the reliable daughter who got responsibility instead of rewards, if you've ever watched a brother get celebrated while you got obligations, you already know this isn't about fairness. It's about what happens when the golden child disappears and the forgotten daughter is the only one left standing. Growing up, Kyle was everything I wasn't. 2 years older, naturally charming, the kind of effortlessly cool that made people gravitate toward him. He played varsity basketball, dated the prettiest girls, got invited to every party in town. I was the quiet one with my nose in books, strawberry blonde hair always pulled back in a practical ponytail, freckles I tried to hide with makeup that never quite matched. I made honor roll every semester, joined every club that might look good on a college application, stayed home on Friday nights doing extra credit. Our father, a self-made businessman who'd built a chain of auto dealerships from nothing, saw himself in Kyle. The confidence, the salesmanship, the way he could walk into a room and own it. He saw something else in me. Something useful but not impressive. Something reliable, but not exciting. When Kyle was 16, Dad bought him a Mustang. Brand new, cherry red. They spent weekends together at car shows, bonding over horsepower and leather interiors. I watched from my bedroom window, pretending to study, wondering what it would feel like to have Dad look at me the way he looked at Kyle. When I turned 16, Dad tossed me the keys to Mom's old Camry across the kitchen table. 160,000 miles, air conditioner that barely worked. Said it was practical. He wasn't wrong, but he also wasn't proud. There's a difference. When I was 14, I won the state science fair. First place, $1,000 scholarship. I came home excited to show Dad. He was rewatching Kyle's basketball game, could describe every basket Kyle made. He glanced at my trophy and said, "That's great, sweetheart," without looking away from the screen. I put the trophy in my room and never mentioned it again. When Kyle was 17, he crashed his Mustang drunk after a party. $4,000 in repairs. Dad paid everything, never mentioned it again. When I was 17, I got a $25 parking ticket while taking the SAT. Dad made me pay it myself. Said I needed to learn responsibility. I learned what responsibility meant in our family. It meant different things depending on which child you were. Kyle barely graduated high school. His grades were mediocre at best, his attendance spotty, but he had charisma and connections from Dad's business network. Dad got him into a state school through a donor connection, paid full tuition plus spending money, set him up in an off-campus apartment. Kyle majored in business, which really meant he majored in parties and networking and showing up to exams hungover. After graduation, Dad brought him into the dealership, started him in sales, moved him to management within a year, eventually made him general manager of the flagship location. Kyle didn't earn any of it. He showed up late most days, left early for golf, delegated everything to people who actually knew what they were doing. But he was the boss's son, so nobody complained. I worked summers at those same dealerships, but not in air-conditioned offices. I did inventory in the back lot, sweating through Texas heat, counting cars and checking VINs for minimum wage. I answered phones when the receptionist called in sick. I cleaned the break room because someone had to, and Kyle certainly wasn't going to. Dad never offered me a real position. Said the dealership world was tough for women, that I'd be better off using my brain somewhere else. What he meant was that Kyle needed the job, and I could figure out my own path. Kyle got the office with his name on the door. I got sunburn and a paycheck that barely covered my textbooks. I went to UT Austin on scholarships and loans, studied finance, graduated summa cum laude. Dad came to graduation, sat in the back, left right after to catch Kyle's company softball game. Kyle had dropped out twice before finally getting his degree, but Dad threw him a huge party. I got a handshake and a $200 check for graduating with highest honors. After college, I moved to Houston for a job at a financial consulting firm, started at $48,000, made senior analyst in 2 years, associate director in 4. By 28, I was managing a team and pulling 6 figures, paid off my loans, bought a condo with my own money. Kyle was still at Dad's dealership making 3 times what he was worth, driving demo cars, living in a house Dad helped finance. The September day with the car and the power of attorney, I was 26. Kyle was 28. Dad had just been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's, though he insisted it was nothing serious, that plenty of people lived normal lives with it, that he'd be running the dealerships for another 20 years. He gave Kyle the BMW as a thank you for stepping up at work. He gave me the power of attorney as a precaution. Just in case, he said, you understand money. Kyle understands people. This plays to your strengths. I nodded, took the envelope, drove home in my Honda Accord that I'd bought certified pre-owned with my own savings. I remember sitting in my apartment that night, the Houston skyline glittering outside my window, reading through the document and realizing what it actually meant. Full authority over his financial decisions if he became incapacitated. Bank accounts, investments, property, the dealerships, everything. I filed it in my safe and tried not to think about why he'd given it to me instead of his golden child. 3 years passed. Dad's Parkinson's progressed faster than anyone expected. The tremors got worse. Then came the stiffness, the shuffling walk, the cognitive changes that crept in like fog. He had good days and bad days. On good days, he was still sharp enough to review sales reports and bark orders at managers. On bad days, he couldn't remember what year it was or why his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Kyle handled the dealership's public face while Dad tried to manage the finances, but Dad's hands were shaking too badly to write checks, and his mind was getting confused around numbers he'd known by heart for 40 years. The company's CFO called me one evening, a woman named Patricia who'd been with Dad for 2 decades. She sounded worried. Said she'd been covering for him as long as she could, paying bills he'd forgotten about, catching duplicate payments before they went through, but things were slipping. Major things. She asked if there was anything I could do. I flew home that weekend, found my father sitting in his home office, staring at a stack of papers he couldn't process. His hands were trembling so badly the pen had made scratches across the page instead of signatures. The desk was covered with unopened mail, some of it months old. He looked up when I walked in, and I saw something I'd never seen in my father's face before. Fear. Real, raw fear from a man who'd never been afraid of anything. I can't do this anymore, he said. His voice cracked on the words. The numbers don't make sense. I used to know all of this. Now it just swims around and I can't catch it. I sat down across from him, moving a pile of invoices off the chair. Dad, do you remember the power of attorney you gave me? 3 years ago when you gave Kyle the BMW? He blinked slowly, then nodded. I remember. You were wearing that green dress, the one your mother would have liked. It was true. I hadn't thought he'd noticed. That was smart of me, wasn't it? Giving it to you? Yeah, Dad, it was smart. Do you want me to help now? His eyes got wet. He looked away, toward the window, toward the garden Mom had planted before she died that nobody had maintained since. I didn't want it to be like this, Maggie. I thought I had more time. I thought I'd beat this thing. I know. But I'm here, and I know what to do with it. That's what you told me, remember? I'd know what to do when the time came. He laughed, a sad sound that turned into a cough. That's what I said, isn't it? The responsible one. He reached across the desk and took my hand. His grip was weak, trembling, but he held on like I was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting. You deserved more than paperwork, Megan. You always deserved more than I gave you. I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know if it was the disease talking or something he'd always thought but never said. So I just squeezed his hand back and told him we'd figure it out together. I activated the power of attorney the following week. Had a lawyer verify everything, met with Dad's banks and financial advisors, spent 3 days at the dealerships going through books that hadn't been properly reviewed in months. The company was bleeding money in ways nobody had noticed because Kyle didn't understand numbers and Dad couldn't see them clearly anymore. Duplicate vendor payments, missed fleet financing deadlines that triggered penalty fees. An entire location's payroll that had been calculated wrong for 6 months. I fixed what I could, flagged what needed deeper investigation, and set up systems to prevent future disasters. Kyle wasn't happy when he found out I'd taken over the finances. He called me on a Tuesday night, already a couple of drinks in from the sound of his voice. What the hell do you think you're doing? No greeting, no small talk. Taking care of Dad's finances, like he asked me to 3 years ago. He gave me the dealerships. I'm supposed to be running things. You're running operations. I'm managing money. That's the split Dad set up. That was 3 years ago when he wasn't thinking straight. I should be handling everything now. I'm the one who's been here, putting in the work. I almost laughed. Putting in the work. Kyle, do you know which location is hemorrhaging money on floor plan interest because someone forgot to file the inventory reports? Silence. I found almost $90,000 in errors and missed payments in the first week. 90,000, Kyle. So yeah, I'm going to handle the finances. You keep doing whatever it is you do. We'll both take care of Dad and the business. He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there in my Houston apartment, looking at spreadsheets on my laptop, and felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not vindication, just tiredness. I was 29 years old, had my own career, my own life, and now I was also managing my father's failing empire because my brother couldn't be bothered to learn basic accounting. For the next 2 years, I managed my father's finances from Houston, flying home every other weekend. I learned more about my father in those 2 years than in the previous 29. Found a photo of Mom he talked to when confused. Found a journal of letters he'd written to me when I was a baby. Stopped when I was 6 because work got too busy. I learned practical things too. How to help him eat when his hands shook too badly to hold a fork. How to sit with him through panic attacks when he didn't recognize me. Those aren't things you can delegate. You do them because someone has to, and the person who should be there isn't. Kyle visited once a month, if that. Too busy, he said. What he meant was watching Dad deteriorate was uncomfortable, and Kyle had never been good with discomfort. Dad noticed the shrinking visits. Is your brother okay? He asked one weekend. He seems so far away. I didn't have the heart to tell him Kyle was far away because being present was hard. Dad's condition deteriorated faster than any of us expected. By the time he was 64, he needed full-time care. I hired a live-in nurse named Rosa, a patient woman who treated him with dignity even on his worst days. I modified the house for wheelchair access, managed the insurance claims, battled with Medicare over coverage decisions. The costs were staggering, but Dad had saved well over the years, and I made sure every dollar stretched as far as it could. Kyle complained about the expenses during one of his rare visits. Said we should consider a nursing facility, that keeping Dad at home was draining the estate. The estate, I repeated. That's what you're worried about. It's my inheritance, too. I've given 15 years to those dealerships. You've been overpaid for 15 years. And now you want to warehouse Dad so there's more left for you when he's gone? He told me I'd always been jealous of him and walked out. My father passed away on a Tuesday morning in March. Peacefully, Rosa said. He'd been having a good week, was lucid and calm, had even recognized me by name when I arrived the night before. We'd watched The Quiet Man together, his favorite old movie, before he got too tired. He'd squeezed my hand before Rosa helped him to bed and said, "Thank you for being here, Meggie. You were always the one who showed up." I'd kissed his forehead and told him I'd see him in the morning. I found him still in bed when I went to check on him at 7. He looked peaceful. The tremors were gone. The tension that had lived in his face for years had smoothed away. He just looked like my father again, the way I remembered him from before the disease started stealing pieces of him. I sat with him for a long time before calling anyone, held his hand even though it was cold, thought about the BMW and the envelope, the car shows I'd watched through windows, the science fairs nobody celebrated. Thought about how in the end I was the one who was there. I called Kyle from the hospice. He didn't answer. Called again 2 hours later. He sounded annoyed at being woken up. "Dad passed this morning," I said. "Oh, I'll try to get there tomorrow. I have some things to move around." Our father was dead, and he had things to move around. I made the funeral arrangements alone. Kyle showed up 2 days before, stayed at a hotel because the house was too depressing. At the funeral, he gave a eulogy about what a great man Dad was. I stood in the back listening to him describe a relationship I barely recognized. The will reading was 2 weeks later. Kyle showed up in the BMW Dad had given him 6 years ago, still treating it like a status symbol even though it was starting to show its age. I showed up in my Accord, same car I'd been driving for years. The lawyer, an older man named Harrison who'd known Dad for decades, read through the standard provisions first. The house would be sold, and proceeds split. Personal effects were divided according to a list Dad had made. Kyle got the watch collection, the golf clubs, the sports memorabilia. I got Mom's jewelry, the family photos, a set of pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandmother. Then came the dealerships. Kyle straightened in his chair. This was what he'd been waiting for. 15 years of showing up, of being the face of the business, of assuming he was the heir apparent. This was supposed to be his moment. Harrison cleared his throat. The ownership shares of Brennan Automotive Group are to be divided as follows: 25% to Kyle Brennan, 75% to Megan Brennan. Kyle's face went white, then red. That has to be a mistake. I've been running those dealerships for 15 years. I'm the general manager. Harrison shook his head. This is the most recent version of Mr. Brennan's will, updated 14 months ago. He was quite specific about the distribution and the reasons for it. 14 months ago, he had dementia. Megan had power of attorney. She obviously influenced him, manipulated him into changing the will. That's undue influence. I'll contest this in court. I hadn't said anything yet. I was too busy processing that my father had given me 75% of everything he'd built. Now I looked at my brother, at his red face and clenched jaw, at the entitlement that had always been there but was now on full display. Kyle, Dad updated his will with his own attorney. I wasn't in the room. Mr. Harrison can confirm that Dad was evaluated by an independent physician and found to be mentally competent at the time of signing. You can contest it if you want, but you'll lose, and you'll spend a lot of money doing it. Harrison nodded. Your father anticipated this reaction, Kyle. He left a letter to be read to both of you. May I? He didn't wait for Kyle to answer. He opened an envelope and began to read. Kyle, Megan, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. And I owe you both some explanations I should have given while I was alive. Kyle, I gave you everything I thought a son should have. The car, the job, the easy path. I saw myself in you and wanted to protect you from the struggles I'd faced, but I protected you too much. I never pushed you because I was afraid you'd fail, and it would be my fault. I let you coast when I should have demanded more. You deserved a father who expected your best, and I'm sorry I wasn't that man. Megan, I gave you responsibility because I knew you could handle it. I told myself that was respect. But the truth is, I took you for granted. You were always there, always reliable, always the one I counted on when things got hard. I never celebrated you the way I celebrated Kyle because I assumed you knew how much I valued you. I assumed wrong. You deserved a father who showed pride, not just expected performance. I see now that I failed you in a different way than I failed your brother. In the end, I'm leaving most of the business to Megan because she's the one who kept it running these past 2 years. She's the one who found the errors that would have bankrupted us. She's the one who sat with me when I couldn't remember my own name. She showed up, not for the easy parts, but for the hard ones. That's what leadership is. That's what I should have taught both of you. Kyle, your sister is offering you a chance to stay with the company as operations manager. I hope you'll take it and learn from her the things I failed to teach you. But if you can't work together, I trust Megan to make the right decisions. She always has. I love you both. I wish I'd said it more. I wish I'd shown it better. Take care of each other. Dad. The room was silent. Kyle was staring at the floor, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he couldn't quite spit out. I was staring at the letter in Harrison's hands, crying silently, processing that my father had finally said the things I'd needed to hear my whole life. It wasn't enough to erase 30 years of feeling invisible, but it was something. It was everything. Kyle contested the will. Of course he did. He hired a lawyer, made accusations about undue influence and mental incapacity, demanded depositions and medical records and a full investigation. The case dragged on for 7 months. In the end, the judge ruled that Dad had been of sound mind when he updated his will, that there was no evidence of manipulation, that the distribution would stand as written. Kyle's lawsuit cost him over $40,000 in legal fees, money he had to borrow because he'd never learned to save anything. When it was over, he called me. First time we'd spoken directly since the will reading. I want to sell my shares, he said. No hello, no acknowledgement of the months of legal warfare. I can't work with you. I want out. Okay. I'll have my lawyer draw up a buyout agreement. Fair market value, independently appraised. I want a premium for my years of service. You'll get fair value, Kyle, what the shares are actually worth. Take it or leave it. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, with something that might have been exhaustion or might have been grudging acceptance. Fine, whatever. Just get me my money so I can move on. I bought out Kyle's 25% over the following year. He took the money and moved to Florida, started some kind of real estate thing that I'm sure Dad's connections helped him get into. We don't talk. Birthday texts sometimes, nothing personal. I'm okay with that. Some relationships aren't meant to be close. Some siblings are just people who share parents. I run Brennan Automotive Group now. expanded from 4 dealerships to 7. The company's worth twice what it was when Dad passed. In my office, I have that manila envelope framed. The power of attorney. The paperwork I got while Kyle got a BMW. Not as a trophy. As a reminder of what my father gave me when he thought he was giving me less. I'm 32 now. Running a company, finally being seen for what I'm worth. My hair's still that strawberry blonde, though now I wear it down instead of in a practical ponytail. Dad used to say I had my mother's coloring, her stubborn streak. I think that was his way of saying he was proud. If you've ever been the reliable daughter who got duties instead of gifts, this story is for you. If you've ever watched a brother get the shiny things while you got the heavy things, this is for you. You weren't being punished for being capable. You were being trusted with what mattered most. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what's given freely. It's what's earned by showing up when everyone else has somewhere better to be. Tell me in the comments, were you the golden child or the responsible one? Subscribe for more stories about people who turned obligations into empires. Sometimes the daughter who gets the paperwork ends up with everything.